Seat.
On the Hot Seat, we tackle the toughest business questions, addressing the most pressing issues our business community faces today. We dive into the core of business growth and strategic development. Whether you're launching a startup, managing a growing business, or refining an established enterprise, we're here to provide you insights that you need. Get ready for candid conversations and practical advice that you can implement today. Stay with us and let's grow your business together.
Welcome to the Hot Seat. I think we're live. We're live?
Yeah, no, we're live. We were live.
We're live. Oh, we love Ecamm, don't we? Welcome to the Hot Seat. It is Tuesday. We're getting really excited back here. You know, it's only a week, a little bit over a week until you're here in Sydney. We have our next quarterly event coming up, and I've been speaking to our clients today and some of our guests that are coming, and they're absolutely pumped. So I can't wait for next week.
We are very blessed that we have such incredible clients as part of the Growth School and the COD community. And yeah, the intensives are becoming a proper highlight. Everyone's kind of like, yep, great. When can we do these sooner? Even though we do a 30-day game plan session every month as well. But it's about bringing together the community and the way they all help each other. And even though, you know, the WhatsApp group has been blowing up, particularly with Alison's 3,000 questions a day on recruitment, it's been quite impressive. And it's amazing how relevant those questions are to other people in the program. But yeah, no, it's exciting. I feel like I haven't been home for so long. I've been traveling so much, and to think that next week I'll be traveling again. So this is Father's Day is effectively the first time I've been home for a while. I mean, not that my family hasn't been traveling with me, but it's kind of like I was saying to Lucy, it'd be nice just to have a weekend in our own house. And she's like, yep, whose fault is that? I'm like, all right, my fault. Okay. But yeah, no, really excited. I got the whole team's finishing off all the incredible workbooks that the team have put together. I think Bonnie's even rehearsing a presentation. I'm not sure I believe that. And the great thing is Bonnie will never actually listen to one of these, so we can say whatever we want about Bonnie, and I think we'll be fine. Daniel, who's editing, might tell Bonnie, but we'll just play it like that. But no, it's really exciting. So what are we here to talk about today, Simone?
We're here to talk about leadership, and I think this is really interesting because we develop our leadership in so many different ways that we're not even aware of it. And just speaking of our clients and what we're doing at our intensives and how we show up for each other as a peer group, I think this all plays into leadership. So I wanted to chat to you about that today. And my first question for you, Kristian, is how do you actually know what your leadership style is? Like, we hear a lot of people talk about this. Probably one of those things you get asked on a job interview or something like that. Like, what's your leadership style? But how do you define that? Or do you even need to?
I mean, look, it's a good question. But in identifying one's leadership style, Simone, you've heard me say this 1,000 times, self-awareness is the key. It begins with reflecting on the interactions, the decisions, and the feedback from your team. A practical approach that I've often recommended in conducting regular self-assessments through tools like, say, Myers-Briggs or the DISC profiling. We currently are getting all of our clients to profile their key people in their organization, and then we use that as an overlay to recruit people that fit the same profile. We do that at management, and now we do it at entry level as well. These tools provide insights into your communication preferences and decision-making processes and how you handle stress, which are critical elements of any leadership style, right? But moreover, seeking 360-degree feedback is invaluable. So by gathering perspectives from your peers, supervisors, direct reports, we can gain a comprehensive understanding of your impact as a leader, and that's how we would do it. And this feedback highlights areas of strengths as well as opportunities for growth, which guides your leadership development. Now, I think that it's all well and good that we're having this conversation, but I think anyone listening is kind of like, well, hang on, that's great. That's how I can identify my leadership style by being self-reflective. I can go and do Myers-Briggs or DISC profiling, and that's going to help. That's where you start. But for those of you who are a little bit lazy and don't want to go and do those, why don't I just, if it's okay with you, Simone, seeing I do a lot of work in leadership, why don't we just explain to people the styles of leadership that are out there. Now, there are generally 7 styles out there, and this varies.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I've studied this at university, and leadership was actually one of my high distinctions, and I really loved it because I never really went and dived into leadership. I knew what it was and knew about all these tools that HR companies use, but I never actually knew what the styles were. And I think this will be helpful for our listeners. So you always start with autocratic, right? Now, this is a style that is characterized by an individual's control over all decisions with little input from team members. No, Simone's laughing, but I am not one of those people. I can be. I think a great leader actually, and this is really important, as we go through these, a great leader actually has the ability to move through styles. Okay, so there are times where you have to be autocratic. Okay, but this will stifle creativity and make employees feel undervalued if you live in that space all the time. Okay, then you got democratic, and this is also known as participative leadership, I think, academically. And this style really involves bringing everyone together for decision making. We see a lot of leaders adopting this, and I say adopting because it may not actually be their natural leadership style. Remember that there are both. I'm genuinely not a democratic leader, like as in it's an adoptive trait. Someone's laughing. She's like, yes, that laughter is correct. But that's because in my line of work as an advisor, I'm generally, they're paying me for the advice. So why would I bring an entire group of people together to do it? But in our masterminds, I do that because that's my adaptive style. Why? Because we want diverse thinking. So again, it's being able to move through these things. But keep in mind that, this will slow your organization down, and it can lead to actually compromised outcomes if you don't manage it well. Okay. Sometimes too many opinions spoil the broth. Okay. So I've kind of taken 2 analogies into one. The one that I have spent a lot of time developing, and that's because I've really focused on being a level 5 leader, is transformational leadership. And this is where leaders inspire and motivate their team through maybe not always effective communication for me, but certainly communication, but a very high level of enthusiasm. And this is where the leaders in this area are actually capable of driving significant change within organizations and creating visions for the future, as well as inspiring the employees to achieve more than they may have originally wanted. Now, in my line of work, in growth school in particular, as well as COD, this is one of the biggest things that we get all the time, isn't it, Simone? People like, you jump on a call with Kristian and your energy goes from 5 to 20 by the end of it, and you go and do crazy good shit. And that's kind of one of my jobs. And so I don't think my transformational leadership is adoptive. It's something I've learned. As soon as I knew this thing existed, I just spent all my time, Jim Collins's work is world renowned in this space about becoming a level 5. And and that's having working on the triangle, on the pieces in the triangle. We're not going to go into this. We teach our clients this stuff, and it does genuinely changes their lives. And then then you've got like transactional leadership. I don't think I need to explain that. This can actually create workplaces that are becoming flexible and often become complex as well as dynamic at the same time. But that's where basically it's all like you give me something and I give you something. Reward and penalties, and I can move into this zone when I need to, but again, you don't necessarily want to be here. Then you got the laissez-faire leadership, which is basically do whatever you want. But if you've got unmotivated or non self-motivated employees or team members or clients, this can be a complete disaster. And I see coaches that have this approach, and it's just like, mate, why are you in coaching? You've got to be pushing you've got to be pushing people. And, a lot of people are getting into coaching because it's, $44 billion industry, tipped to be a $90 billion industry, and they want flexibility, but you're doing a disservice to your clients if you're going to be in this space. Then you've got servant leadership, which is one of my favorites as well, and I like to move through this. This is where you genuinely serve your team while fostering that sense of community and that shared decision making. Simone is a servant leader, 100%. This is you, like to a T, and she's all about the shared decision making. But servant leaders, what they do is they put the needs of others first, and that can lead to higher engagement and morale, but it may struggle with disciplines and authority, especially when making tough decisions or they need to be made. So people need to be, and everyone has their own unique style, and you need to be able to work within that. And then you've got, the final one is situational leadership, and that's exactly what it is. People adopting the style that tailors to their need, and you're moving through. So look, there's a place for each style in different environments, and I think I had to provide that context when you're trying to unpack it. So people now are probably thinking, hey, you're right, I now understand what you meant at the beginning, and now I know that if I went and did a Myers-Briggs or a DISC profile, I could have leaders. One of our clients overseas in Ireland, we've just had their key 4 people done, and they all turned up to be commanders, right? And I knew this was it. And I said, okay, so why are we not recruiting managers that are all commanders? So then we went in and recruited, then we did this on the other managers, and the other managers are not. And then you look at the performance, and you go, like, the commanders are outperforming everybody else. So it's really interesting when you start to look at the data. So I'm just trying to think. So, for example,
what do you say then, like your dominant leadership style is somewhat where your strengths are in terms of a profession as well. So would a lot of entrepreneurials be transformational sort of leadership and those kinds of things?
No. I think you got to be careful because entrepreneurs vary. You've got introverts, you've got extroverts. Steve Jobs was notoriously known not to be overly inclusive, but then at the same time, he had an entire department dedicated to innovation, and collaboration. So I think that it just depends. Your natural style may not necessarily lend to what you're doing, and that's why you need to be able to navigate through all of them. Look, leaders who don't invest in leadership are failing. Okay, in my opinion, because you're leaving shit on the table that you don't need to lead. And look, it's really hard to navigate through these things because even though I know them, even I struggle sometimes because then emotion gets in the way. But the moment you know about it and your team is trained that way, it's like layers, right? And you got to peel the onion back at the same time. But I want to just use an example of a real situation where this happened, and it involves a technology startup that I've been advising, and initially, adopting purely a directive style that then shifted to a more transformational approach after working with me. This change actually was a catalyst that we actually got through an employee survey that I got them to do, that we needed greater empowerment and involvement in decision making. Now, I knew this straight away, but I couldn't get this person to fully understand it and appreciate it because their ego is quite big. But once we did this, they went, shit, Kristian, you're right. Now, as a result, the company grew 30% in employment engagement, and there was a significant reduction in turnover. I think it was about 25%, and underscoring the effectiveness of adaptive leadership. Okay, so without going into too much context, but essentially, I identified, hey, you've got a very autocratic leadership style. We now need to, which is fine when you're starting, right? But once you've started to develop a team, you need to look at the others. Now, if he'd gone democratic, which is where a lot of people go, the business would have probably collapsed. And so the key, and if he'd gone laissez-faire, it would have been a disaster. But when I said, look, why don't we focus on you becoming a transformational leader? Now, for me, that's easy because it's an area I've played in a long time. But let's be clear, I'm not a leadership coach. And I was able to go, okay, why don't we adopt this? And he didn't quite believe me. So when we ran the survey and empowerment came up and involvement in decision making, it was really easy to say, hey, listen, here's the data. Let's work at it. And within, within 4 weeks, he's smart cookie. So he picked it up very, very fast. And now we'll see what the results are going to be in the next 6 months from that. But look, understanding your leadership style, Simone, isn't just about that introspection, but also about how effectively you can inspire, motivate, and guide others to a shared goal. And I think that's probably the overarching thing to all of that.
Yeah, okay. That's great. I want to touch back onto something that you said very briefly before, and that was around emotion. And this is something I've heard you say before as well, is about the difference between being an empathetic leader and a sympathetic leader. What's the difference between being sympathetic to your team and empathetic?
Wow, you're going for tough questions today, aren't you? That's once again challenging me a bit. Look, understanding, and I shouldn't cover my mouth when I'm trying to speak. It's because I'm thinking of the answer. Understanding the distinction between empathy and sympathy is actually crucial for everyone, but for leadership, really crucial. Empathy, Simone, involves putting yourself in someone else's shoes, genuinely understanding their feelings and their perspectives, and using that understanding to guide your actions, okay? It's about the connection and the shared experiences, which is essential in leadership because it fosters a supportive and a collaborative environment, okay? I have very high emotional intelligence, and that is because I have built not only resilience, but emotional resilience over my lifetime. You cannot develop empathy without agitation, without adversity, without having gone through things. And I think that, when I did the documentary with Simi Riot, that was a significant strength of mine, along with altruism, because I'm genuinely empathetic for people. My clients message me and update me on their entire life, because they know that I truly understand, but they also know that I care. That's empathy. And that's why you guys decided a couple of years back that care was actually going to be one of my core competencies as opposed to one of my values, or at least our organization's values. But when you're surrounded by empathy or people that are empathetic, you get far better outcomes. And I remember, in 2016, 17, being at uni and doing my MBA and learning about leadership. And this was a massive thing. And at the time I was like, oh yeah, sure. And I'd been through all of the shit too, but I didn't quite understand how. And it's interesting, I have a lot of empathy for our clients and perhaps necessarily not as much empathy for my team, right? And so this is something that I've been working on to go, okay, hang on, I need to have both. And that's because, I don't know, I have different expectations of people. And so I've got to manage that. I love how this always becomes about me explaining where I'm wrong and what I'm doing. I don't know why I'm so open and honest with you guys. In our community I am, but I shouldn't probably do this on live stream because people don't understand the entire context. But on the other hand, look, sympathy is more about feeling pity for someone else's hardships without necessarily understanding their emotional experiences. And it can sometimes create that sense of distance, even superiority, which isn't conducive to building any kind of strong relationship, let alone building a team. So, so in terms of, and a good example, and I've got one, I'm just trying to, without giving away who and what, it's a mid-sized marketing firm. The managing director actually exemplifies in emphatic leadership. And during a restructure phase, that required layoffs. Okay, and this was a really cool experience for me to work in because we both understood it. We were both empathetic, but we had to actually make sure that we looked after the business and not just the people. But instead of merely expressing sympathy, what she did that really impressed me was she engaged in open dialogue with all the affected employees, provided personalised support, and facilitated career transition services for everyone. Now, this approach not only eased the emotional burden on employees, but it also maintained morale and trust with all the remaining team members that stayed beyond the restructure. Now, illustrating empathy can lead to more positive outcomes than sympathy alone. And I think that's the real key message here. And so empathetic leadership is about, Simone, active engagement and actionable support, okay? Because that builds resilience and also builds a committed team. But in contrast, sympathetic leadership, while well-meaning, right, often stops at that emotional acknowledgement without fostering that deeper interpersonal connection or even practical solutions. So, you know, I'm kind of hoping that I've been able to pack that in and hopefully give people some relevancy on how that applies.
It's a huge topic and one quite hard to unpack in just a few minutes around that. I
But
think
also
where
tried to
I've
keep that one
experienced or
short.
seen. Yeah.
I also tried to keep that one short because I looked at the time and like, oh my God, they took me 15 minutes to answer the first question.
It's a big topic, right? And there's a lot to understand and there's a lot to unpack within that. And I
Yeah.
think where I've seen this go wrong with people who are leading is it becomes a victim mentality. So the sympathizing then leads into a toxic or a negative culture because everyone just like comes down with the one person, which is really, really interesting.
Here.
Okay, so I'm going to switch around my last little question because this has just come into my mind. Where does vulnerability stand in all this? Let's go a little bit Brene Brown in here and just, do you need to be vulnerable as a leader to showcase that to your team or to your clients? Or what do you feel about leadership and vulnerability?
Look, everyone knows I'm a massive fan of Brene Brown's work. Vulnerability in leadership involves leaders openly acknowledging their weaknesses, uncertainties, and emotions, okay? And this level of transparency can be counterintuitive in traditional views of leadership that actually prioritize strength and infallibility, okay? However, being vulnerable as a leader, Simone, means being honest about one's limitations and open to others' ideas and feedback, right? So it's super powerful. And I'm very vulnerable. You know, God knows we're talking to 1,000 or 2,000 people here, and I've got no problem expressing my weaknesses. And why? Because it's a learning experience. And my clients, our clients, they value that because they know they're always going to get, it's going to be straight shooting, not from the hip, but genuinely straight shooting. And I'm going to be able to bring the context into the equation. But they also know that I'm not a superhero. You know, even though a lot of them do. I mean, you know, Amanda's famous quote, "I chose you over Tony Robbins." Thank you. Bless you, Amanda. You know, and Amanda, if people don't know who Amanda is probably one of the best event managers in Australia, having been involved in the FIFA World Cup for the women's and some other significant major events recently. She started with us in Customers on Demand in our baby program and has developed a formidable events business, keeping in mind that when she was in COD, she wasn't wanting to go into events. And after a year and a bit in that program at her own pace, now she's a growth school and she's crushing it. and it's amazing. And again, I was able to get to the root cause of her situation because she was vulnerable with me. Sorry, Amanda, I know you're going to be listening to this at some point, but I'm going to keep using it as a good example. Because of my vulnerability as a leader, our clients are more vulnerable. In our team, I'm not sure that vulnerability applies to everybody. You certainly value it, but other members of our team don't, and that's because they have an issue with themselves being vulnerable. So it's breaking down the barrier. And so you're going to get that from people to people. But I think, vulnerability in leadership, Simone, builds trust, 100%, right? It enhances engagement on every level. It fosters innovation. I really strongly believe that, because people are not scared to bring ideas to the table, right? Because they're not going to be succumb to criticism from failure because they have a fail-forward approach like we do. It improves communication. It develops resilience. It develops emotional resilience. And we don't talk about that enough. But there are challenges, okay? There are bloody challenges, There is a perception of weakness. I've had people who've said they've watched some of my stuff and they're like, decided not to go with you because I thought that, you had some significant weaknesses around, your emotional openness. And I look at them and I go, you were just petrified of the idea of you having to open up, generally males. And I think this is also why we work with so many women, or why I work with so many women, is because of my vulnerability, my ability to understand the mental load experienced by women, but also men. We have male clients who are single fathers, and they carry the same mental load effectively as a lot of mums, albeit not single mums, like mums even in a relationship, right? So, but being vulnerable, the challenges too are, there's a fine line between vulnerability and oversharing. Okay, I recently was away, and there was a lot of people oversharing at an event, and I was like, I'm fine with it, and I think that's why they were oversharing because I was there. But
This is
other people
interesting.
were kind of
What's your definition of oversharing? What does this mean?
when you go beyond business, beyond some people need to get things off their chest and they feel safe, and I love it. That's why to me the oversharing. I can't go into it because I'd have to use examples of oversharing. But the reality of it is, I value those people, right? And if they ever listen to this, they'll know. And we had other conversations on the back of that. But to some people, when you look around, you're like, okay, you're feeling obviously uncomfortable because you can't deal with this because you've never dealt with that. Whereas the 2 or 3 people that were sharing or oversharing had similar experiences. And so that's the challenge. It's not a negative. I think it's a positive. And that's when you're surrounded by the right tribe, right? And then I think the final thing that you got to be really cautious about is the risk of exploitation. Okay, there are some highly competitive, toxic people out there. Okay, and when you are being vulnerable, those people will take advantage of you, right? I'm not saying this for everyone, but the media are very good at exploiting even the most subtle things that you say or do without thinking of consequence, right? And so that can really hurt you or hurt people that are being vulnerable. My advice to all of you is don't ever give up, because you will have more loyal followers than you'll have people that want to bring you down. But you've got to be aware of it, right? So again, it all comes down to self-awareness, emotional intelligence, training and developing, investing, but more importantly, surrounding yourself with the right people that you trust. So if you want to be vulnerable and you want to demonstrate vulnerable leadership, just make sure that you surround yourself in a tribe of people that genuinely value you and want to be part of that. And again, because it
I
builds
think
trust.
so many people are looking for that, right? We're all looking for that. But how do you actually find that? You can't really quantify that with features and benefits when you're trying to find the right people. So
Ha!
let's wrap up on this question then. What are you looking for to find your people?
What am I looking for? I mean, that bloody question. I was just answering that question with Alice, one of our
Mm.
clients, and Alice owns Palliant Designs, and I've been working with Alice now for a long time. Been 5 years, and Alice is in the same building with me at the South Australian Chamber of Commerce, and so she'll come in and turn on my lights if I'm working in the dark, unaware that I might have a headache. Right? We have a wonderful relationship, and she can probably hear me. She's just down the end of the corridor. But we're having this conversation, and she's saying it must be really hard for you, being as capable as you are, and the amount of people that you've helped, because it's very hard to show people what you do unless they see it in action. And I said, actually, funny you say that. We've invited guests to our Sydney intensive with the express permission of our members to show them behind the scenes. And why? Because even our students and members, they think it's important that people see it. So I think that if you want to demonstrate vulnerability and empathy, start a podcast and talk like you really are and don't make up shit. But then you've got to get people to watch it. But ultimately, you've got to find the pathways. And so for us, how long have we been working on this? For 6-7 months, where it's like, hey, and that's why I did the documentary with Simi. That was super confronting. I mean, lucky that the 3 hours of footage only became an hour, because they cut out some pretty big. I didn't actually give them any limitations. I never actually watched the whole documentary until it was published live. And Simi was like, that's what I love about you. Like, once people get to know you, you don't have actually any fear. And I don't. I mean, the only fear I have is, my children being unwell, my wife being unwell. I have a genuine, I'm developing over time, a genuine fear of only knowing that I probably have, 1/3 of my life left. But that's not fear that paralyzes me. That's fear that drives me to continue to achieve more, be more, have more. And why? Because I like to give. To give you an example, Leonardo and Lucy last night were working on the T-shirts that we're sending over to Fiji for the village that we visited, and they've got something like 200 children between the ages of newborns and teenagers. And Lucy was like, "Why don't we send them T-shirts?" And I'm like, "Okay, sounds like a cool idea." And so her and Leonardo are working on a design, and because Leo's 9, and we've convinced him that if he wants to work in the family business while he's at school and make some pocket money, he's got to learn coding. Clever father. Say coding. It's a skill that'll serve him later. Coding and graphic design, and he loves art like his mum. And so, we and then Lucy was there building that with him, and showing him, and then they were like, so where are we going to buy them from? I said, well, here, go research. These are the costs. This is the budget that we've got. Because it surprised them how much 200 T-shirts actually cost, plus freight, plus all the stuff. And they actually came to the conclusion that, they want to have the Live With Purpose logo on them. And I said, that's great. Now they've become a tax deduction. That's fantastic. And Lucy's like, that's the wrong thing to say to Leonardo. And I said, why? He goes, he wanted to put it on there because he understands what Live With Purpose means. And I was like, oh, okay, great. But now that the logo's on there, Luch, it's now full-blown tax deduction. So, that actually works to our advantage. She's like, you're terrible. And I can't help myself. Like, somehow I would have probably put a logo on it in a corner because it is a tax deduction. But the thing is, when we walked through the village, we just saw happy smiles and happy people. And that's what Leo thought. He said, I want people to feel a connection to what we've done, not just give them a plain, T-shirt that they can wear and wear out. And I thought that was really cool. But that vulnerability, I guess what I'm saying is the vulnerability that we share in our household allows our children to be expressive and do things. And that idea was Lucy's idea. It wasn't my idea. And then when she told Leo and Lavender was too young. She's kind of, oh, yeah, they've got T-shirts already. And didn't quite understand. She's like, why don't we just give them candy, like we did? And I'm like, because that'll rot their teeth, Lavender. Like, but they like candy. I'm like, yeah, but they do like candy, right? But, you know, and I guess on the candy thing, I actually use that as a really good example for my children, because I said, did you see when the children came to you and you gave them one candy, even though they saw you with a whole packet, they didn't ask for another one? That's gratitude. They genuinely were grateful. And what did they do? Some of the children went and called all the other children to come out. It was Saturday, so the kids were not at school. And I thought it was such a beautiful intersection of, you know, humility and empathy, right? And care. And, you know, and Lavender was like, yeah. And, you know, and I said, you know, when you guys asked me for a second cookie, that's not being grateful, right? And they were like, are you making this about us? Totally making it about you guys, right? But it's such a, you know, and that's leadership in itself. You know, adults, as parents, we have to be leaders. I always say to Lucy, I'm the biggest failure as a parent. I say it all the time, because it's not something I'm naturally good at, but I try hard. You know, I do whatever I can. And for Lucy, it's never good enough. No, I'm kidding. My wife loves me tremendously. But the thing is, it's a hard gig. Being a parent is the hardest thing I've ever done, because you've got to be empathetic. You've got to be a leader. You've got to balance out through all of those styles of leadership. And there's so much emotion, isn't there, Simone? You know, you've got 3 boys. Actually, you got 4 boys and a dog, and the dog is at least a female. But, you know, you've got to manage a household of bucket loads of testosterone. And as they get older, you know, when they're telling you, like, I'm not listening to you, Mum. And then, you know, even though Dad can walk in his police uniform, they go, not listening to you, mate. Then it's kind of like, you know, how do you navigate that? And that's where investing in leadership is so important, whether you're in business or not. You know, that's it.
100% agree. I think there's so much to take away from that. And even just knowing that leadership starts from so young, right? We're not just talking about adults or business owners here. It's a life skill, isn't it? Well, I feel that it is anyway.
It's interesting you say that. I've always been reflecting on, like, you know, we get into a lot of heated debates with friends, people that we meet who, you know, when they find out that we send our kids to private schools, why do you do that? From, you know, they don't know anything else, and I agree. You know, does that create entitlement? I think it does, and we work very hard at teaching our children balance. You know, we go on a holiday, we always go and you know, see what the other side of the coin looks like, so that they can understand how privileged they really are, not in a negative way, but in a very positive way, so they can learn to give. You know, our children, by their own volition, have always given to the homeless. You know, when they go with my mother-in-law to the markets on a Sunday morning, they always bring their pocket money with them and buy. They go and ask specifically, one person each, and they did this by their own volition. And you know, it's something that always made me cry when I first found out. Leo's been doing this since he was 5 or 6, and he'll spend $5-6 to. And he asked them, "Would you like something hot to drink, or would you like something to eat?" And it's like fascinates him how they're so happy, that they're more happy about having a conversation with him, because so many people just walk past these people and ignore them, right? I think who was it? Richard Gere, or one of the actors did this as a study just last week, and he dressed up. And oh God, I'm sorry, I don't remember who the actor was, but it was one of those people in that genre, that era, and dressed up as a homeless man, and he was disgusted that only one person in 6 hours actually went up and spoke to him. Everyone else abused him, and and it's like, holy shit, what do we become? Leadership is about humility. Leadership is about so many things, and teaching our children should be our number one thing to do. And where I'm going with this, when we talk about private schools, I am fascinated at how many people who I went to school with, whose children now go to the same schools, and they were leaders at school, and their children are becoming leaders because they teach leadership at home, right? And so this is where I also explain to our children how privileged they are to go to the schools they go to, where they get to learn these values along with other people who display the same values. And it's no wonder that those schools then are outperforming on a per capita basis the other schools, right? So that's my argument, and people will always, a lot of people still continue to disagree with me, and that's fine. I couldn't give a shit. It's your opinion, right? As it is my own. But I think that my opinion, I've invested a lot more time in thinking about, and I know, again, this statement will piss people off because it says that I'm more superior. I'm not more superior. I've spent a lot of time looking at this, and I'm always challenging myself to go, why is this happening? Right? Like, I'll create, you know me well enough. I create hypotheses all the time. Like, if we do this, then what? Why? Because in my line of work, I have to question everything. And so, even my wife used to question me about why we send the kids to private school. And now she's saying, shit, I can't understand what you mean. I said, and it progressively gets more intense as you go up higher. As they go from junior school to middle school, you will see those qualities come out. And how do I know this? Because I went to a school like that and had been expelled from multiple other schools that were private but not at the same level, right? And I went to a public school for a period of time too. I'd hate to imagine what I would have become had I not gone to the school, not because of the school, but the people I was surrounded by. They made me a better person. And the irony of it is, like, my best friend in the world is a friend that I ended up going to school with, even though I didn't go to school with for the first 7 or 8 years of our friendship. And we're still friends today. And a lot of our circle are still the same people, right? And, are we all extraordinary? No. We're just ordinary, in our case, men. But even the women, the girls that went to other schools that we had grown up with because of the school's associations, they're just ordinary people doing extraordinary things. But we all have these value alignment, which is really important. And again, I want to just wrap that up. On leadership, value alignment is so important, right? Building your team, getting your team morale up, driving those are all fundamental things that are really important to the success of your organization. And I think that's truly important.
That's amazing. There's so much value in this episode and so many things to take out for yourself personally, for your family or for your friends, and for where you're at with your teams. And I'm sure you're going to see and hear some of these things now. When you're aware, you can't switch that off, right? It just is what it is. So Kristian Livolsi, thank you very much.
Don't switch it off, Simone. Like, don't switch it off. Like, at the end of the day, what I really like about this hot seat idea that you came up with? And I think it's gotten better and better as we've progressed because I'm getting more loose and more loose. Today wasn't so loose as last week. But I think what's really important is that we are sharing our opinions, our ideas. There is no glass ceiling here, right? Like or a glass mirror. This is just us being raw and saying to people, I want to give people value, whether you're paying me or not, right? Like, I'm both selfish as I am generous. And the reality of it is, we all know that people are making buying decisions on a longer thing, but not everyone can afford to have the support, but at some point they will. And so my whole philosophy is ask questions, dive deep, get yourself, in the mud, learn as much as you can from whoever you can get it from that has the same values as you, but don't be frightened to share, don't overshare initially, but don't be frightened to share. Be vulnerable, be transformational, and as always, live with purpose. So I'm going to let you close it now.
I love that. Great closing message, Kristian Livolsi. Thank you very much for your time and insights. As always, we'll be back next Tuesday with the Hot Seat.
Thank you for joining us on the Hot Seat. We hope today's session gave you valuable insights to drive your business forward.
Remember, every challenge is an opportunity for growth.
Every question brings us closer to the answers that can transform our businesses. Stay connected with us, follow our journey, share your thoughts, and be a part of our community.
And don't forget to subscribe, like, and hit the notification bell so that you never miss future episodes. Together, let's elevate your business to new heights.
Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time on the Hot Seat.